The phone call came exactly 3 hours into my drive. I was heading to my mother-in-law's 75th birthday party, my car packed with gifts and the most important surprise of all. A mansion deed worth $500,000 that I just bought with my inheritance money. Before we proceed, thank you for watching Granny's narrative. Please subscribe and tell us where you are watching from in the comment section. My husband David's name flashed on the screen. I answered with a smile, expecting him to ask where I was or if I needed anything. Turn around right now. His voice was cold and flat. What do you mean turn around? I'm almost there. Just 20 more minutes. Mom called an emergency family meeting. She does not want you at the party. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. She does not want me there. David, I just bought your mother a mansion. With my own money. The inheritance from my grandmother. No. We appreciate it. But this is a family-only meeting. Blood family. Mom and Stephen both agree it is better this way. Blood family. After 22 years of marriage. After thousands of Sunday dinners where I smiled through your mother's comments about my cooking being too spicy or not spicy enough. After all the holidays where she suggested I might be happier staying home because family gatherings can be overwhelming for outsiders. After everything, I was still not blood family. So what am I supposed to do with the mansion, David? We will figure it out later. Just come home, Maggie. I sat there on the side of the highway, hazard lights blinking. Other families drove past, heading to their Sunday celebrations. Normal families who actually wanted each other there. Understood, I said quietly. I hung up without another word. But instead of going home like David expected, I made a different choice. I drove straight to Henderson Real Estate, where I had signed the mansion papers just that morning. Mrs. Patterson, Barbara Henderson, looked surprised to see me back so soon. Is everything okay with the property? Change of plans, Barbara. I need to list the mansion for sale immediately. Her smile disappeared. No. Did something happen? You could say that. List it for $600,000. Cash offers only. But Mrs. Patterson, that is $150,000 more than you paid this morning. I know exactly what I am doing, Barbara. The market is hot. Someone will pay it. Within the hour, I had signed new paperwork. Barbara promised to contact every serious buyer on her list. My phone kept buzzing. 8 missed calls from David. 4 from his mother Linda. 3 from his brother Stephen. I ignored every single one. Instead, I drove to a place I never thought I would go. The parking lot of Patterson Construction, the family business David and Stephen ran together. The business that had supposedly been struggling for years. The business that could barely afford to pay Linda's assisted living costs, according to them. Sitting in that parking lot, I opened my laptop and did something I should have done years ago. I researched the Patterson family finances. Public records, business filings, tax information that was available to anyone who bothered to look. What I found made my hands shake. Patterson Construction was not struggling. According to public records, they had their best year ever last year. Profits over $3 million. David and Stephen each made $200,000 salaries. Plus bonuses that totaled another $100,000 each. They were not poor. They were just greedy. My phone rang again. David's name. This time I answered. Maggie, where are you? Mom is worried sick. Is she? How thoughtful of her to worry about someone who is not blood family. Do not be dramatic. You know she did not mean it like that. I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. Actually, David, I think she meant it exactly like that. Just like she meant it when she said my pot roast was interesting at Thanksgiving. Just like she meant it when she told me I should skip Christmas last year because I looked tired. Maggie, you are overreacting. Am I? Well, here is something that might help you understand my reaction. I just listed your mother's mansion for sale. For $150,000 more than I paid for it. The silence lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. You what? You heard me. Linda can stay in her current place. I will keep my grandmother's money. Blood family only, right? Maggie, you cannot be serious. Mom was just emotional today. She did not mean to hurt you. Really? Because I am also looking at public records showing Patterson Construction made $3 million in profit last year. You told me the business was barely surviving. You told me you could not afford to help your mother. But you each made $300,000. Another long silence. I do not know what you think you found, but you do not understand business finances. I understand lying, David. And you have been lying to me about money for years. I hung up and turned off my phone completely. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. No more pretending Linda's cruel comments were just jokes. No more accepting David's explanations for why we could not afford things while he secretly collected huge bonuses. No more being the family bank account while being treated like the family disappointment. The mansion would sell fast in this market. Barbara already had 2 buyers interested. By tomorrow, I would have $600,000 in my account. And Linda would be exactly where she always wanted me. Outside the Patterson family circle. But I was just getting started. Because as I sat in that parking lot, I realized something important. If they lied about the business finances, what else had they been lying about? The next morning, I did something I had never done in 22 years of marriage. I went through David's home office while he was at work. Not because I thought he was cheating. David barely had enough imagination for his regular life. I was looking for financial documents. The real ones. Not the simplified versions he always showed me. What I found in his locked desk drawer made me sit down hard in his chair. The key was taped under the desk, because David had the security skills of a golden retriever. Inside the drawer were folders. So many folders. The first one had tax returns going back 10 years. Not the basic summaries David showed me when I asked about our finances. Complete returns with every detail. According to these documents, we were wealthy. Actually wealthy. The construction company paid David dividends on top of his salary. Over $400,000 total every year. While I had been living on the household money David gave me each month, shopping at discount stores because he said we needed to be careful, he had been making more than most people see in 5 years. The second folder was worse. Insurance policies I never knew existed. Investment accounts with hundreds of thousands of dollars. A trust fund nobody had mentioned. Property deeds for 4 rental houses. 4 rental houses. David owned 4 rental properties that I knew nothing about. Properties making $6,000 in rental income every month. Money that never appeared in our household budget discussions. But the third folder made me pour myself 3 fingers of David's expensive whiskey. The whiskey I was not supposed to know about because we could not afford luxury items. Linda was not the struggling widow they claimed. According to the financial statements in this folder, she owned her assisted living apartment completely. No rent, no mortgage. And she had investments worth over $300,000. The woman who spent years complaining about how expensive her medications were. The woman who sighed about the cost of her cable bill. The woman who made me feel guilty for not helping more with her expenses. She could support herself perfectly fine. I was still sitting there, staring at Linda's bank statements when my phone rang. Barbara Henderson with good news. Maggie, I have wonderful news. We received 5 cash offers on the mansion. All above asking price. The highest is $620,000. They want to close in 10 days. Accept it, I said without hesitation. Do you want to talk to your husband first? Barbara, let me be very clear. I bought that house with my money, in my name only. My family made it clear I am not part of their decisions. So no, I do not need to discuss anything with anyone. After hanging up, I called the bank. I wanted to separate my money from our joint accounts. Not all of it. I was not trying to steal from David. Just enough to make sure I was financially independent while I figured out what to do next. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. Hidden behind the property deeds was a business card. Summit Investigations. And a receipt dated 8 months ago, right after my grandmother died, and the obituary mentioned her estate. The amount was $9,000. For what? The receipt did not say. My hands shook as I called the number. Summit Investigations. This is Marcus. Hello, this is Margaret Patterson. I found your business card in my husband's papers. I want to know what services you provided. Mrs. Patterson, I would need to speak with your husband before discussing confidential work. I understand, but I am calling because I found evidence he hired you to investigate me. I want to know what information you gave him about my personal finances. The long pause told me everything. Ma'am, I cannot discuss details. But I can confirm we did a standard background and financial check 8 months ago. 8 months ago. Right after my grandmother passed away. Before I got my inheritance. Mrs. Patterson, I really cannot say more. You already said enough. Thank you. I hung up feeling sick to my stomach. David had not just hidden money from me. He hired someone to investigate my grandmother's wealth so he could plan how to access my inheritance. My phone rang. David again. Maggie, we need to talk. Can you please come home? I'm home, David. In your office. Looking at very interesting documents. I heard him suck in his breath. Maggie, whatever you found I can explain. Can you? Because I am looking at tax returns showing you make 4 times what you told me. I am looking at deeds for rental houses I did not know existed. I am looking at investment accounts worth more than my entire inheritance. And I am looking at a receipt from Summit Investigations showing you spent $9,000 researching my inheritance before my grandmother was even buried. That was not about you. It was about protecting our family's financial future. The nerve of this man. Protecting the family. David, you spent $9,000 investigating your own wife like I was some kind of criminal. How is that protection? We needed to understand the tax implications of your inheritance. Stop lying. I talked to Marcus at Summit Investigations. He confirmed you hired them for a background and financial assessment right after my grandmother's obituary was published. Silence. Do not do anything stupid, Maggie. Come home so we can talk rationally. Rationally. David, there is nothing rational about finding out your husband investigated your family's money while lying about his own finances for years. I will be staying somewhere else tonight. Maggie, you are being emotional. We can work this out. I looked around his office at all the evidence of his lies. Actually, David, I think I am being logical for the first time in our marriage. I hung up and kept reading. There had to be more. People do not create this level of financial lies and hire investigators just to avoid honest conversations about money. In the 4th folder I found what I was looking for. Bank statements showing mysterious cash deposits that did not match any business income one could identify. Payments to something called Griffin Holdings. And letters from their accountant about staying compliant with federal loan requirements during the pandemic years. I had been married to a man hiding serious money while making me feel guilty about every dollar I spent. But sitting there reading about David's secrets, I felt something I had not experienced since I was 19 years old. Excitement, energy, purpose. He wanted to play games with family money. Perfect. I had been watching him play for 22 years. Now it was my turn. 3 days later, I sat across from Patricia Wells, the estate attorney who handled my grandmother's will. Patricia was a sharp woman in her 50s who built her practice protecting people from exactly this kind of manipulation. Let me understand this, Patricia said, reviewing copies of everything I found. Your husband has been lying about family wealth while controlling your money through an allowance system. And he hired an investigator to research your inheritance. Exactly right. I want to know what legal protection I have. Patricia smiled, but it was not a nice smile. More than you think. The private investigator alone suggests financial planning that deliberately excluded you from knowledge of marital assets. That is very serious in divorce proceedings. She pulled out a legal pad. Tell me about the mansion purchase. Were you under any pressure or lies when you decided to buy it? They spent months telling me Linda could not afford proper housing. That the business was struggling. That they could not help her financially. I thought I was helping someone in need. But she has $300,000 in investments. And you bought it entirely with your separate inheritance money. Every penny. Have the records. Patricia nodded. But that makes it easier to get restitution if needed. Now what outcome do you want? Reconciliation or divorce? I had not actually thought about divorce until that moment. But sitting in Patricia's office, looking at evidence of David's betrayal, I realized something. I do not want divorce immediately. I want to give him one chance to be completely honest and rebuild our relationship properly. But I want legal protection while I see if he can do that. Smart approach. What leverage do you have? I thought about the investigator, the hidden money, Linda's fake financial problems. I think I have quite a bit. Patricia spent the next hour explaining my options. Since David hid marital assets and controlled my access to family money, I could claim more in any divorce settlement. Since Linda accepted money under false reasons, I could sue for it back. Since they investigated my finances without permission, I had grounds for invasion of privacy. But the most interesting option was one I never considered. There is another approach, Patricia said, leaning forward. Instead of playing victim, treat this as a business negotiation. You have information they do not want public. You have money they want access to. Use that position to restructure your family relationships on your terms. What kind of restructuring? For example, offer to keep their financial lies private in exchange for specific things. Full financial transparency going forward. Equal control over major family decisions. A formal apology from Linda. A guarantee of respectful treatment. I like this idea. After 22 years of marriage, I knew these people. I knew their weaknesses, their fears, their pressure points. Instead of walking away from everything I built, I could use that knowledge to rebuild it on my terms. I left Patricia's office with a thick folder of legal options and a completely new way of seeing my situation. I was not just an angry wife who got lied to. I was a woman with serious leverage in a family that underestimated her for decades. My first stop was the public library. I spent 3 hours researching Patterson Construction's business dealings. What I found made their financial lies look minor. The company got over $900,000 in pandemic relief loans that were forgiven. According to public filings, they claimed financial hardship and could not maintain payroll during those years. But their tax returns for those same years showed record profits and huge bonuses to David and Stephen. I was not a lawyer, but I watched enough news to recognize possible fraud. David and Stephen received almost $1 million in federal disaster money while reporting their best years ever. My phone buzzed constantly while I researched, but I ignored every call. Finally, sitting in my car outside the library, I listened to my voicemails. David, Maggie, please come home. We need to talk about this rationally. Linda. Margaret dear, I think there has been a misunderstanding. David told me about your little reaction. I want you to know I forgive you. Stephen, Maggie, David is really upset. Whatever is happening between you two, do not drag the family business into it. David again. Maggie, I do not know what you think you found, but if you plan to do something foolish with that information, remember you are part of this family too. What affects us affects you. Was that a threat? After 22 years of marriage, was David actually threatening me? Perfect. Because I learned from my grandmother that threats only work on people who have something to lose. I checked into the Riverside Inn for a week. Then I called David. Maggie, thank God. Where are you? I am at a hotel deciding what to do with everything I discovered. Everything. Maggie, whatever you think you found. David, I found tax returns, property deeds, bank statements, evidence you hired someone to investigate my family's money. And I found evidence that Patterson Construction got over $900,000 in federal loans while reporting record profits. Want to explain any of this? The silence was deafening. I will take that as a no. Here is what happens next. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, our house. You, Stephen, and Linda need to be there. We are going to talk about honesty, respect, and the future of our relationships. Maggie, you are scaring me. But fear is healthy when you have been lying to someone for years and they figure it out. What do you want from us? I looked out the hotel window at the town where I spent 22 years being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. David, I want what I always wanted. To be treated like family instead of like hired help who sometimes gets invited to dinner. You are family. No, David. Family members get honest information about finances that affect them. Family members do not get investigated by private detectives. Family members do not get excluded from important conversations because they are not blood family. I could hear his heavy breathing. 7 o'clock tomorrow. Be there. And bring your honesty. All of it. David's truck was in the driveway the next evening. So was Stephen's BMW and Linda's old Cadillac. A family meeting just like Linda wanted. I walked into my own house to find them sitting around the kitchen table like judges at a trial. Linda at the head in my usual chair. David and Stephen on either side like bodyguards. They even helped themselves to my good coffee and the expensive cookies I was saving. There she is, Linda announced. Our birthday girl who thinks she can throw tantrums and demand attention. I set my purse on the counter carefully. I placed Patricia's folder next to the coffee pot. 3 sets of eyes watched every move with the wariness of people who knew they got caught. Good evening, family, I said pleasantly. Nice of you to make yourselves at home. Maggie, David started, but I held up my hand. Actually, Linda should speak first, since this is about her birthday and all. Linda straightened in my chair, clearly ready for this. Margaret, I want you to understand that Sunday's decision was not personal. Certain family business discussions are inappropriate for non-family members to hear. Non-family members. Interesting term for a daughter-in-law of 22 years. You know what I mean? Actually, I am not sure I do. Can you explain what makes someone family versus non-family in the Patterson hierarchy? Stephen shifted uncomfortably. Maggie, let us not make this harder than it needs to be. Oh, but I think we should make this as hard as it needs to be, Stephen. 'Cause I learned fascinating things this week about what makes families work. I opened Patricia's folder. I took out the investigator's business card and placed it on the table where all 3 could see it clearly. The silence was spectacular. Where did you get that? David's voice was barely a whisper. From your desk, along with tax returns showing your real income. Property deeds for rental houses you forgot to mention. And Linda's financial statements proving she could buy her own mansion. Linda went pale but recovered quickly. You have no right to go through private family documents. Family documents? I laughed. Linda, you said I am not family. And according to this receipt, you have been treating me like a suspect under investigation for 8 months. I pulled out copies of everything I found. Now, since we are all here, why not have that family discussion you did not want me to hear on Sunday? I am particularly interested in the part about investigating my inheritance and when you plan to access it. David reached for the documents, but I was faster. Touch my property again, and this conversation ends with a call to authorities about federal loan fraud. That froze all 3 completely. You have been busy this week, Stephen said slowly. Very busy. Did you know public records are actually public? Amazing what you can learn about a company's finances when you know where to look. I sat down in the only remaining chair. Here is what will happen. We are going to have complete honesty for the first time in this family's history. Then we will negotiate new terms for my continued participation in the Patterson family experience. You cannot blackmail your own family, Linda sputtered. Cannot I? Because from where I sit, family has been manipulating me for years. Emotional manipulation. Financial manipulation. All manipulation. I opened the folder and pulled out the summary Patricia prepared. Let us start with money since that seems to be everyone's main concern. David, your annual income is about $400,000. Stephen, yours is $370,000. The family business is worth about $5 million and makes over $3 million in profit annually. I turned to Linda. And you, Linda, have a net worth of about $300,000 plus your apartment and investments. How did you, she began. How did I find out? Izzy. I looked in the desk where my own husband has been hiding our family's real finances for years. David found his voice. Maggie, we never meant to deceive you. Finances are complicated. Complicated. David, you told me we could not afford a vacation while collecting $40,000 quarterly bonuses. You gave me a monthly allowance like a child while owning 4 rental properties. You let me think your mother needed financial help while she is worth more than most people's life savings. The rental income goes back into the business, Stephen said defensively. Does it? Because bank records show it goes into David's personal account. just like dividends that supposedly do not exist. Linda had been quiet, but now she spoke with her usual commanding tone. Fine. You discovered we are not poor. Congratulations. What exactly do you want? Money. What I want, Linda, is what I always wanted. To be treated like family instead of like hired help who sometimes gets invited to dinner. You are family, David said weakly. No, David. Family members get included in important conversations. Family members get honest information about finances. Family members do not get investigated by private detectives to see if they are worth exploiting. I stood and walked to the window, looking at the garden I planted and maintained for 22 years. Here is my offer. Complete financial transparency going forward. Joint control of all marital assets including rental properties. Equal voice in family business decisions. And a formal public apology from Linda for Sunday's humiliation. And if we refuse? Stephen asked. I turned back to face them, feeling calmer than I had in years. If you refuse, I contact authorities about loan fraud. The IRS about unreported rental income. And the local newspaper about how a prominent family investigated and manipulated a woman's inheritance through elaborate lies. They exchanged glances, calculating odds, trying to find an angle I missed. You would not actually destroy your own family, Linda said finally. Try me. Because here is what the Patterson family never understood about me. I spent 22 years learning to survive your casual cruelty. I developed patience, observation skills, and a clear understanding of how far people push boundaries when they think they can get away with it. You taught me well. Now it is time for your final exam. The silence lasted nearly 3 minutes before Linda spoke. You have changed, Margaret. Have I? Or have I just stopped pretending that being quietly grateful for scraps was somehow virtuous? Tom cleared his throat. Maggie, assuming we agreed to your terms, how would this work practically? Practically, David, it works like a marriage between equals instead of whatever performance we have been doing for 22 years. I sat back down and pulled out detailed notes Patricia helped me prepare. Joint ownership of all assets means I get added to rental property deeds. Today, it means I get access to all business financial statements and a voice in major decisions. No more secret accounts or hidden income. That is not unreasonable, Stephen admitted grudgingly. Linda's apology needs to be public because her disrespect was public. I do not care if it is a letter to the newspaper, a statement at the next family gathering, or a social media post. But it needs to acknowledge she deliberately humiliated me and her behavior was wrong. Linda's face turned purple. I will not be dictated to by your daughter-in-law who just found evidence of federal fraud. I interrupted. Linda, let me be very clear about your position. I have evidence you knew about the investigation into my finances. Your son hired someone to research my inheritance. That makes you part of financial manipulation. You are bluffing, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I pulled out a copy of David's check to Summit Investigations. Am I? David stared at the check. How did you find that? I found it because you left it in your desk. Apparently you thought I was too stupid to ever look for information about my own family's finances. The family dynamics were breaking down exactly as I hoped. 22 years of watching them taught me their weak points. Linda's was her need to look morally superior. Stephen's was his fear of being cut out of business decisions. David's was his desperate need to avoid conflict. So we are all in agreement there was a deliberate, coordinated effort to research and manipulate my inheritance. I asked pleasantly. I want to make sure I understand the scope of the lies before I decide whether to involve law enforcement. It was not lies, David said desperately. We were just planning for the family's future. Whose family, David? Because on Sunday, Linda made it very clear I am not part of the family you were planning for. Linda finally seemed to grasp her mistake. Margaret, I was upset about surprise party planning. I did not mean to exclude you from family decisions permanently. Did you not? Because according to what I found, the plan seems to have been to secure my inheritance money then continue treating me exactly like you always have. Like someone whose opinions do not matter. I stood and walked to the coffee pot, refilling my cup with deliberate calm. The irony, of course, is I never wanted your money. I wanted your respect. I wanted to be included, to be valued, to feel like my opinions mattered. They do matter, David said weakly. Do they? When was the last time you asked my opinion about a major decision, David? When was the last time you included me in a family discussion before making plans that affected my life? He opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly unable to think of a single example. That is what I thought. I returned to my seat and looked at each of them. Here is reality. You can agree to my terms and we restructure this family dynamic as a partnership of equals. Or you refuse and I pursue legal action while building a very comfortable independent life. You are not seriously considering divorce, Linda said. Linda, 2 weeks ago I would have been horrified at divorce. Sunday morning I would have done anything to make this family work. But sitting here now, looking at evidence of how thoroughly you all betrayed my trust, independence looks remarkably appealing. I pulled out my phone and showed them Barbara's text. House closed successfully. Profit deposited. $120,000. Congratulations. By the way, Linda's mansion sold. I made a nice profit on a house bought for a woman who did not need it with money obtained through deliberate emotional manipulation. Not a bad start to my independent financial portfolio. David reached across and touched my hand. Maggie, I love you. We can fix this. Can we, David? Because love without respect is not actually love. It is just habit with convenient tax benefits. I did not pull my hand away, but I did not squeeze back either. If you want to fix this, start by proving you can treat me like an equal partner instead of a financial resource to be managed. Stephen had been quiet, but now he spoke. What guarantee do we have you will not use this information against us later, even if we agree? I smiled at him, recognizing the business mind that helped build Patterson Construction into a multi-million-dollar operation. The same guarantee I had for 22 years that you would not lie to me, investigate me, or manipulate me. None whatsoever. The difference is now we all know where we stand. I closed Patricia's folder and stood. I am going back to my hotel to pack. You have until noon tomorrow to decide whether you want a wife and daughter-in-law who is an equal partner, or whether you would prefer to explain to the community why the Patterson family is facing various legal complications. As I reached the doorway, I turned back one last time. Oh, and Linda, next time you want to test someone's generosity, maybe start with your own. I woke the next morning to 19 missed calls from David and a voicemail that sounded like panic or genuine regret. With David, it was hard to tell the difference. Maggie, please do not do anything irreversible. We accept your terms. All of them. Just please come home so we can work this out. I listened twice, analyzing the tone. Desperation, definitely. But whether it was desperation to avoid consequences or desperation to actually change remained to be seen. I called Patricia before calling David back. Good morning, Maggie. How did it go? About as expected. They apparently agreed to my terms, but I want legal protection in place before I agree to anything. Smart thinking. What kind of protection? I want a formal agreement spelling out the financial transparency, the joint ownership transfers, and the decision-making equality. Something legally binding I can enforce if they backslide. Patricia spent 20 minutes outlining how we could structure a post-nuptial agreement protecting my interests while giving David a chance to rebuild our marriage on honest terms. By 10, I had a draft agreement that was fair but firm. By noon, I was back at our house with Patricia, facing David, Stephen, Linda, and their uncomfortable attorney. Thank you for coming, I began. I had a legal agreement prepared outlining exactly how our new family dynamic will work. I slid copies across the table. This post-nuptial agreement requires complete financial transparency, joint ownership of all marital assets, and equal decision-making authority in matters affecting our family. It also includes specific penalties for any future lies or manipulation. David was reading carefully, his face growing paler. Maggie, this is comprehensive. Needs to be comprehensive, David. Trust once broken requires extensive verification to rebuild. Linda found her voice. Margaret, this agreement essentially makes you an equal partner in the family business. That is exactly right, Linda. I am offering to be the wife and daughter-in-law you should have wanted all along. Someone fully invested in family success and treated accordingly. Stephen looked up from reading. What about the federal loan issue? How do we handle that going forward? I exchanged glances with Patricia. That depends on whether there actually was fraud or just poor documentation. If the loans were legitimate and properly used, there is no problem. If they were not, well, that is a conversation we need to have honestly. David cleared his throat. Maggie, the loans were complicated, but they were legal. Money was used for business purposes, even if paperwork was not perfectly clear about specifics. Then you will have no problem providing complete documentation to support that claim. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Are you asking us to trust you with information that could potentially be used against us? Stephen asked directly. I am asking you to trust me with the same honesty you expect from me. For 22 years, I trusted this family with my financial security, my emotional well-being, and my future. Now I am asking for the same consideration in return. Linda had been studying the agreement with focused attention of someone looking for loopholes. This apology requirement. What exactly are you expecting? I am expecting you to acknowledge publicly that you deliberately excluded me from family discussions, that you accepted my financial help under false reasons, and that your treatment of me was wrong. A simple statement of fact. And if I refuse? I leaned back, meeting her gaze steadily. Then you prove you are more committed to protecting your pride than to having an honest relationship with your family. David reached across and took my hand. Maggie, I know I made mistakes. Serious mistakes. But I want to fix this. I want us to have the marriage we should have had all along. For the first time since this started, David sounded like he actually understood what he did wrong. Then sign the agreement. Prove you want partnership instead of control. The next hour was spent reviewing details and answering questions from their attorney. By 3, we had a legally binding agreement giving me everything I asked for. Financial transparency. Equal decision-making authority, joint ownership of all marital assets, and a clear path forward. Linda signed her apology letter with obvious reluctance, but she signed. David added my name to all property deeds that afternoon. Stephen provided complete business financial records and agreed to include me in all major business discussions going forward. That evening, sitting in our kitchen for the first time in over a week, I felt something I had not experienced in our marriage before. Actual partnership. Maggie, David said quietly as we cleaned up from dinner. I need you to know I understand what I did wrong. It was not just about hiding money. It was about not seeing you as an equal. What changed your mind? He was quiet for a long moment, carefully drying the dish in his hands. Watching you walk away. Realizing you were serious about building a life without us if we could not treat you right. I spent 22 years thinking you would always be there no matter what we did. It never occurred to me you might decide you deserved better. And now I know I married someone much stronger and smarter than I gave her credit for. And I know that if I want to stay married to you, I need to deserve it every day. It was not a perfect ending. Trust once broken takes time to rebuild. Linda's apology was grudging rather than heartfelt. The business integration had challenges as I learned aspects of Patterson Construction I never saw. But it was an honest beginning. 6 months later, I was reviewing quarterly financial reports in my new office at Patterson Construction. A real office with my name on the door and actual decision-making authority. The business was thriving under more transparent management. My suggestions for expansion already generated over $400,000 in new revenue. Linda and I would never be best friends, but we developed a respectful working relationship based on clear boundaries and mutual acknowledgement of each other's contributions. David and I were learning what it felt like to be married to someone you actually respected. It was different from before. Less comfortable perhaps, but infinitely more genuine. The most important change was not financial or legal though. It was psychological. I learned that demanding respect does not make you difficult. It makes you unavailable to people who have no intention of treating you well. I learned that sometimes the family you marry into is not capable of change until they face the real possibility of losing you. And I learned that the strongest position you can take in any relationship is being genuinely willing to walk away if your fundamental needs are not met. These days, when people ask how I found courage to stand up to my entire family, I tell them the truth. I did not find courage. Found clarity. Clarity about what I deserved, what I was willing to accept, and what I was capable of building on my own. The Patterson family spent 22 years teaching me I needed them more than they needed me.